Kia ora koutou katoa. In 2008, the book Saving Paradise, How Christianity Traded Love of This World for Crucifixion and Empire, was published. It's a big title, and it's a big book, written by two big names in the academic world. Well, the academic world of progressive feminist scholarship, anyway. Rita Nakashima Brock and Rebecca Ann Parker. It's also a book about a big idea, namely that for most of the first millennium of Christian history, salvation was primarily not something that Jesus did on a cross in order to free us to ascend to a heavenly paradise, but rather salvation was something we do with Jesus in caring for, creating justice and healing here in this earthly paradise. Salvation and paradise are here and now, about grace, gratitude, and commitment to this world. The text set down for today, Exodus 1 and beginning of Exodus 2, about the saving of baby Moses, is a memorable one. How much in fact, how much is fiction? Well, it's a moot point. But the story of trying to survive in an oppressive, murderous regime is one that is familiar in many times and places. It's a story of fear, of commitment to life, of bravery, and of finding hope. Of the story's 5 women, 3 were Egyptians and 2 Israelites, and thus on different sides of the ethnic political divide. Of these women, 2 were midwives and one a princess, and 2 were servants or slaves, and thus on the different ends of the class divides. All took enormous risks to save a child. Not a child they knew would become the great Moses, but a slave child, a nobody, who'd been consigned by his race and his gender to death. One way of reading this story is seeing this land of Egypt as a paradise in waiting, like you can see the land of Aotearoa, like you can see every land. It is waiting for the day when the language and actions of fear and suspicion that drive prejudice, racism, hatred, and oppression are no more. It is waiting for the day when the language and actions of the heart that tells us to reach across divides, to love thy neighbor, and to protect the vulnerable are in the ascendancy. It is waiting for the day when the ways of oppression are superseded by the ways of inclusive love. And every baby, every child, be they rich or poor, Egyptian or Israelite, Māori, Pākehā or Pacifica, be safe, be valued, be loved, survive and thrive. This is a vision of salvation, of what we work towards, what we look for and what we rejoice in. The other vision of salvation is where Jesus does all the work by suffering and dying on a cross. We just have to believe it all. And paradise is a place you go to, if you believe enough, when you die. Brock and Parker, like many feminist theologians, do not believe that the torture and murder of Jesus saves anyone. This Jesus died to save us idea sanctifies violence on our behalf and requires us to be grateful for harm done to another. This in turn creates profound ethical confusion about violence. Some versions of this idea suggest that Jesus died voluntarily, and he is therefore a model of self-sacrificing love that Christians should imitate. Such an idea tolerates and condones abuse and violence. It is dangerous and destructive theology. Rather, Brock and Parker, not unlike our preaching at St. Luke's, focus on the life of Jesus and his movement, and tell stories of how loving communities save people for flourishing in this earthly life. Like 5 courageous women saving a baby, who in turn, in the mythology of Israel, was instrumental in saving a people. Following the work of Diane Apostolos Cappadona, she's a noted religious art historian, Brock and Parker found there were no images in churches of Jesus dead on a cross until the 10th century. And that change was due to a shift in Christology in Western Europe. And I'll say a little more about that next week. Instead, the pre-10th century images that can be found in churches in places like Rome, Ravenna, and Istanbul were images of escape from danger or persecution and iconographies of paradise. Ravenna in particular was where Greek, Latin, Christian and barbarian cultures were connected east and west. Its 5th and 6th century churches depict Arian, Orthodox and Gothic forms of Christianity focused on paradise. Some of the best preserved mosaics depict paradise with green meadows, flowers and trees, lush fruit and rivers, including the Jordan. Deer drank from the rivers, sheep grazed in the meadows, birds perched on the trees, and cherubs swam, swimmed, sailed, windsurfed, and rode swans in the Jordan. A vibrant Christ was depicted either on a throne or perched on a blue globe of the earth, or immersed in water, naked, being baptized by John. The divine hand of blessing often peeked out from the clouds. A dead and suffering Jesus was nowhere to be found. John Delamue's A History of Paradise explains how in this time paradise, based on Genesis 2's Garden of Eden, was understood as a special place on this earth for humans to thrive. While it was also in the afterlife, paradise was just not a post-mortem realm. Augustine of Hippo, 5th century, called the world a smiling place, and asserted that the seeds of the paradise garden and spiritual transformation were hidden within the whole earth at the beginning, and they awaited the light of justice and mercy to bloom. Augustine's church literally bought people out of slavery, which is a concrete, this worldly understanding of justice and salvation. Can you hear the echoes of the Moses liberation story? The echoes of Wilberforce, the echoes of King, the echoes of those trying to right the wrongs of colonization. Another important finding of Brock and Parker is that Christians employed paradise ideas to resist empires that falsely claimed to provide gifts of paradise to humanity. Paradise, it said, was the measure by which empires were judged. Was the empire providing and working towards a land that was lush, humans and creatures that were happy and thrived? Or were empires instead working towards embellishing their power and privilege at the expense of the poor? Some leaders, like Cyril of Jerusalem, made pragmatic use of Rome's patronage, while also teaching that Christ in time would destroy the very Roman Empire. During a famine, Cyril sold Rome's gifts that had been given to the Jerusalem church in order to feed the hungry. And when the emperor heard of this, Cyril was deposed. Paradise also shaped the meaning of Christian salvation. Rather than sinners being saved from eternal punishment through Jesus' sacrificial death, humanity was restored to the image of God through the incarnation, and paradise was reopened through the resurrection. Ephraim of Syria frequently used the image of a tarnished mirror to describe humanity's plight before Christ restored humanity's luminosity. To this day, Eastern Orthodoxy teaches that salvation is a transfiguration of the world, a restored vision of life on earth, reverencing the sacredness of life here and now, rather than salvation being some sort of get-out-of-jail-free card that transports you off the planet while earth perishes. So the teaching and understanding was that we are in paradise now, and that paradise must be cared for and maintained by the cultivation of ethical virtues and life-sustaining spiritual practices, such as generosity, not hoarding, prudence, not wastefulness, communal discipline, not personal desire, and mutual assistance, not a form of individualism. The sort of values and practices that our wounded earth today is crying out for. Our first millennium ancestors seemed to understand that living well required wisdom, community, and a willingness to take moral responsibility for our failures. This idea of paradise, noticing the sacred here and now, with traces everywhere, and its graces reaching out to us, invites curiosity, invites the sciences, invites an openness to beauty, invites the arts, invites us to see beyond the walls of church, of culture, of class, to find illumination and knowledge in all sorts of surprising, strange and serendipitous places, even among our enemies. Think of the Moses story. Protestants have long assumed the primacy of written texts for understanding Christianity. But for 1500 years, such texts were for an elite few. Before the printing press, most of the faithful learned about Christianity through communal liturgy, through instruction, and through the art and icons that surrounded them when they met. It was a rich and powerful visual, sensual, and ritual world. That's why today many of us are nurtured on Sunday mornings, not by hearing the Bible read or even expounded, but by the aesthetics of the buildings we worship in, the art that surrounds us, the grace of music, the poetry of liturgy, and the company, the presence of one another. These are our texts too. Just as the worlds outside, the struggles and joys, the fears and the hopes, are also texts. Or better, invitations inviting us to see, to notice, to give thanks for, and to work towards improving. Let's return again to our Bible story. The princess came to bathe by the river, but there she noticed. She had eyes to see. At that point she made a decision to not walk on by and pretend all was well, Instead, she sent an attendant to fetch the basket, knowing full well there would be implications. And she took pity on the child. It can be a powerful word, pity. And at that point she made another decision. Rather than protect the baby by other means, saying he's sending him and his family down country, and it wouldn't have been too hard to work out who his sister and mother were, the princess decided instead to invite this slave baby of a race her father saw as a threat into her and his household. She not only has pity, she makes a statement. She exhibits ethical virtues, ethical grace. She wants the world to be different, and she's prepared to risk her privilege to try and make it so. She wants to build paradise in this land. She wants to save not only her people. In so doing, this Egyptian foreigner of a foreign religion becomes a new mother of Israel, like Sarah and Rachel and others before and since. Blessings to you this week.